Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Views of an Outsider, the Outsider's View from March 15th. If you want to keep up with everything that's going on in the world, but you don't want to drag down your entire life by listening to the news every day, then get the main stories right here once a week, and spend the rest of your time actually living your best life. Let's get right into it. The FBI started off this week by investigating the recent attempted bombing in New York City as a potential act of terror, after one of the suspects, who also wielded a homemade bomb at a protest outside the day before, claimed that he had been inspired by ISIS. Last Sunday, Tom Winter of NBC News reported that one of the suspects referenced ISIS directly in his statements to law enforcement after being arrested, which is what prompted the ongoing terror probe. Gloria Pazmino of CNN reported that both suspects admitted to being inspired by ISIS. Now, according to CBS News, the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force has taken over the investigation that is thoroughly looking into 18-year-old Amir Balet and 19-year-old Abraham Kayumi, both of whom live in Pennsylvania. A lab in Quantico confirmed that their homemade bombs were not hoax devices, they were the real thing. Deadly IEDs that were using the same components that the world has seen in many previous terror attacks, a topic that we will circle back around to shortly. Two sources told CBS that these devices contained sports drink bottles that had been filled with explosives and set inside of glass jars that were packed with nails, bolts, and screws. The explosives that were connected to an M18 type firework had a fuse attached to them, and two sources said that the explosive material inside the homemade bombs was TATP, which is a white powder made from acetone and hydrogen peroxide, both of which are readily available household chemicals. Thankfully, both of these devices did not detonate after they had both been ignited by these young mass murderers. I call them that because even though they failed, that was indisputably their intent. So that is what they are. They did go all the way through with their attempt to murder others, making the bombs, placing them in crowds, and igniting them. And so they should be treated as if they had succeeded, because it was not for a lack of trying. Both of the accused have made extended visits to Istanbul in the last 2 years, Kayumi for a few weeks, and Balat for 4 long months, so their travel history is now being closely examined as well. Kayumi also traveled to Saudi Arabia in March of 2024. Fox News reported that Balat's parents are both from Turkey, and they were naturalized into U.S. citizens in 2017, while Ibrahim Kayumi's parents are both from Afghanistan, like the shooter who murdered 2 National Guardsmen over Thanksgiving. Kayumi's mom was naturalized in 2009, and his dad was naturalized in 2004, and either they just failed utterly as parents and accidentally raised an awful monster for a son, or we need to look into how much of his ideology was something that he got from them, and or their mosque. Kayumi and Balat both reportedly told investigators that they had watched many ISIS propaganda videos and that they had deliberately targeted right-wingers who were protesting outside of Gracie Mansion, the mayor's home in New York City. And they had targeted these people because they believed that these protesters had disrespected their religion. You know what's even more disrespectful than words? Murder. Especially indiscriminate mass murder. So, yeah, I don't care. The socialist mayor of NYC, Zoran Mandami, issued a statement about the attack, but he had more criticism for the, quote, white supremacist that was leading the protest outside of Mandami's residence than he did for the actual would-be mass murderers, saying that the demonstration was, quote, rooted in bigotry and racism, and that it was not welcome in New York City. Which, correct me if I'm wrong, is still an American city, Your Highness, with the right to free speech and the right to peacefully assemble, even for things that you dislike. The protest, which was organized by some far-right activists that I am not at all familiar with, someone called Jake Lang, focused on denouncing the so-called Muslim takeover of New York City. While Mandami did at least mention his condemnation of the violent bombing attempt that followed, he did not mention the names of the terror suspects or their inspiration. How convenient. Instead, he said simply that the attempt to use an explosive device and hurt others is not only criminal, it is reprehensible and the antithesis of who we are. I don't know who you mean by we, because it seems par for the course for your side. All the more so given your wife's posted likes of all things Hamas. Meanwhile, the FBI raided the homes of these two young men who have since been charged with this ISIS-inspired attack after these raids had been authorized by the courts. The charges were announced by the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, in a post on Monday, which read, "We have charged the two alleged ISIS-inspired terrorists who attempted to bomb a protest in New York City. We will not allow ISIS's poisonous anti-American ideology to threaten this nation. Our law enforcement officers will remain vigilant." The New York Post reported that Qayyumi's residence, which belongs to his parents, who immigrated here from Afghanistan, is a 5,800 square foot home that is worth $2.25 million. The New York Post added that Ballett's Middletown residence is a 3,200 square foot home that is worth $653,000. He is a high school senior who just flushed his entire life down the toilet. And while that is tragic, I cannot honestly say that I pity him if he has already at this age made himself into something this vile so soon in life. The only reason that many people are not dead right now is simply the grace of God, not a lack of trying by these violent adult killers. The story in New York could have been very different if things had gone as the genocidal crusaders tried to make them go. The explosive that they used, TATP, an explosive that is known by the nickname the Mother of Satan, is one that terrorists have used to kill hundreds of people since 2005, so I guess the substance is well named, considering exactly who it is that uses it. That explosive can also be packed with shrapnel, such as nuts, bolts, and screws, to increase its lethality, which was done in this case, as we already noted. One of the suspects threw an explosive near the crowd of protesters, and the other suspect dropped the second device near police officers. The New York Post reported that one of the suspects predictably cried out, "Allahu Akbar," when he was questioned by investigators. And it has also been reported that one suspect was caught on video giving the ISIS salute 3 times after his arrest. Whether the attempted attack on Americans in Manhattan was merely inspired by ISIS, or whether these elitist, brainwashed brats and their attempted murder are actually linked to the terror group themselves, one thing is already well known. TATP has been a primary ISIS weapon that has been used by the terrorist group for years. Since 2005, nearly 500 people throughout the world have been killed by terrorists who have used the Mother of Satan bomb in their attacks. Most of the terrorists who have used TATP while carrying out these mass killings in the past were either inspired by ISIS or part of ISIS. Radical Muslim terrorists inspired by Al-Qaeda used TATP to bomb London in 2005, and they succeeded in killing more than 50 people while wounding nearly 800 more in one of England's deadliest terror attacks ever, where TATP bombs were used to attack London's underground trains and a double-decker bus. Paris suffered the same, when ISIS fighters carried out the deadliest terror attack in France's history on November 13th, 2015, using TATP explosives as part of the arsenal that those terrorists used to kill 130 people in 6 different locations all throughout Paris. Their attack also involved using semi-automatic rifles and suicide belts that were loaded with the mother of Satan explosive. Brussels caught it next only 1 year later, when 3 ISIS suicide bombers detonated mother of Satan bombs in a coordinated attack at the Brussels airport and on board of a train that was leaving a metro station on March 22, 2016. Those terrorists killed 32 people and wounded nearly 350 more. 2 more attackers had planned to detonate additional bombs that day, another one at the airport and another one at the metro station, but they chickened out and fled the scene before carrying out their part of the attack, which was the only reason that twice as many people did not die that day. And who could forget 2017, when a suicide bomber detonated a backpack filled with TATP and shrapnel at an Ariana Grande concert in Manchester, England on May 22nd, killing 22 concertgoers, including 10 young people that were under the age of 20. Authorities determined that his blast was strong enough to kill people that were more than 60 feet away, and that it was, quote, designed to kill and maim indiscriminately the largest number of innocent people. Then, on Easter Sunday in 2019, ISIS terrorists again used the mother of Satan in bombings that targeted Christians who were worshiping in churches and at hotels throughout Sri Lanka. More than 250 innocent churchgoers were killed in those coordinated attacks. The TATP bombs were worn by suicide bombers who pulled the strap to detonate their vest, and I promise you that whatever awaited them on the other side, it was not virgin sex slaves. Now, New York has been hit, and it was a miracle that this city and its people, who have already suffered massive loss at the hand of terrorist oppressors, was spared the fate of so many other cities. It is us or them, solely because they have defined the terms and they refuse to stop killing for their God. Us or them. And people better wake up to that reality really soon. Some people's eyes are already wide open to what these oppressors do to others when they are in their power. After reports emerged that the Iranian women's national soccer team had been branded wartime traitors by Iran's state-run media just for refusing to sing the national anthem of the regime that oppresses them as women and murders their fellow people, Iranians, just for protesting. On Monday, President Trump intervened on their behalf, announcing that he had spoken with Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, detailing the delicate situation that these young women were in. Just hours before that call, Trump had weighed in on the situation online, insisting that the Iranian women's soccer team be granted asylum in Australia, posting, "Australia is making a terrible humanitarian mistake by allowing the Iran national women's soccer team to be forced back to Iran, where they will most likely be killed. Don't do it, Mr. Prime Minister. Give asylum." After his call with the Prime Minister less than 2 hours later, President Trump shared this. "I just spoke to Prime Minister Anthony Albanese of Australia concerning the Iranian national women's soccer team. He's on it. 5 have already been taken care of, and the rest are on their way. Some, however, feel they must go back because they are worried about the safety of their families, including threats to those family members if they don't return. In any event, the Prime Minister is doing a very good job having to do with this rather delicate situation. God bless Australia." As you probably know, the 26-member Iranian team was in Australia at the time for the Women's Asian Cup, and during their opening match against South Korea, they bravely remained silent during Iran's national anthem. Even that mild act of protest against the Islamic Republic triggered a vitriolic response from Tehran. Mohammad Reza Shahbazi, a presenter on the state-controlled television network, called for those players to face strong consequences for their shameless betrayal. Context is important in understanding that. Under Iran's penal code, charges of treason carry the death penalty. FIF Pro, the Global Soccer Players Union, formally called on FIFA and the Asian Football Confederation to ensure the protection of this team. On the ground in Australia, that team is reportedly under intense surveillance. Human rights advocate and former Socceroo captain Craig Foster said that it is clear that they are being silenced and coerced, noting that regime-connected minders are embedded with the squad, restricting their movements and their phone use. And as a result, one that was plain for all to see, the very same players who remained silent during their first match were filmed singing the anthem loudly during the subsequent games against Australia and the Philippines. Local councillor Tina Kordrastomy, who has been in contact with some of the players, openly said that the shift was a result of extreme intimidation, saying they are all terrified, particularly for the safety of their family members back home. The Australian government itself has maintained a cautious diplomatic stance. Their foreign minister, Penny Wong, expressed solidarity with the Iranian women, but declined to comment further on what would be done for them, saying, "We know this regime has brutally murdered many of its own people. I don't want to get into commentary about the Iranian women's team that might put them or their families in any greater danger." The team's tournament in Australia officially ended last Sunday night on the Gold Coast. While some advocates have suggested that Australia should provide emergency humanitarian visas to the team, similar to the ones that were granted to the Afghan women's team in 2021, sources close to the squad indicate that many of the players fear that seeking asylum would lead to the imprisonment or even the executions of their relatives in Iran. Concerning the sports news within our own borders, the NBA canceled the Atlanta Hawks Magic City Monday event, which was set to occur during the coming week. It was canceled after some NBA players raised concerns about having to participate in a theme night that heavily promoted and celebrated a notorious strip club at a family sporting event. At their matchup against the Orlando Magic, the Hawks were set to honor what was being called one of Atlanta's iconic cultural institutions. They were going to promote this titty bar with merchandise and a halftime performance by the Atlanta rapper T.I. But the center for the San Antonio Spurs, Luke Cornett, went against the elitist grain and spoke up, voicing his concerns about having a night that is entirely designed around the idea of bringing heavy attention to Magic City, the strip club in Atlanta with a somewhat lurid history, and doing so at a family sporting event that has nothing to do with red light district activities. He wrote, quote, "The NBA should desire to protect and esteem women, many of whom work diligently every day to make this the best basketball league in the world. We should promote an atmosphere that is protective and respectful of the daughters, wives, sisters, mothers, and partners that we know and love. We desire to provide an environment where fans of all ages can safely come and enjoy the game of basketball, and where we can celebrate the history and culture of communities in good conscience. The celebration of a strip club is not conduct aligned with that vision." Preach. The Warriors center, Al Horford, who played for the Hawks for years, also pushed back against Magic City Monday, saying that he agreed with Mr. Cornett's assessment of the evening, whose focus was not one that created an environment for fans of all ages, and the league agreed with these men after a huge amount of online attention. On Monday, the NBA Commissioner, Adam Silver, issued the following statement. When we became aware of the Atlanta Hawks' scheduled promotion, we reached out to Hawks leadership to better understand their plans and rationale. While we appreciate the team's perspective and their desire to move forward, correction, not the team's desire to push forward, the Yoko wife of one person in a leadership position who took over and thought that her husband's team was her toy to be used to hold fans hostage so that she could shove her worldviews down their throats as the price of being able to watch a basketball game. For the record, we have heard significant concerns from a broad array of league stakeholders, including fans, partners, and employees. I believe canceling this promotion is the right decision for the broader NBA community. Translation? You lose, Yoko. Your tribe has voted you off the island. And that was not the only right choice to come to light this week. According to a new law, all public and private schools in Pennsylvania will now be required to add cursive handwriting lessons back into their curriculum beginning next month. According to Fox 29 Philadelphia, this bipartisan bill passed the House 195-8 and passed the Senate by 42-5 before it was signed into law by the Democrat governor of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, last month. It will take effect on April 12th. The sponsor of this bill was the Republican state senator, Wayne Langerholick, who said in a statement that by reintegrating cursive into the curriculum, we are investing in our students' cognitive development, strengthening their legal preparedness, and preserving their connection to historical literacy. Republican Representative Dane Watrow, a co-sponsor of the bill, said in a statement, "Cursive is more than handwriting. It's a bridge. It connects us to our history, strengthens learning, and deepens our understanding of the world. By teaching cursive, we're equipping students with skills that sharpen the mind and safeguard our shared heritage." Cursive writing was removed from the requirements in the Common Core Standards for Public School Education in 2010. Thank you, Barack Obama. His standards stressed printing letters like children for the rest of their lives and learning keyboard skills instead, so that you live on screens all of the time and cannot write if the power goes out, leaving the younger generations completely unable to read anything that was written by earlier generations. But then again, cutting people off from access to their history has always been a standard move for gaining Orwellian control over vast populations. But on top of that, a new study found that cursive writing also helps brain development in children. The neuroscience behind writing found that cursive writing involves greater activation of the motor cortex and cerebellum because it requires fine motor coordination and smooth transitions between letters. The report went on to note that this fluidity enhances memory retention and cognitive engagement, as the writer must anticipate the next letter in a continuous motion. According to the website MyCursive, almost half of our states still require or at least encourage cursive education in the classroom, and that number has been steadily increasing over the years. Earlier this year, New Jersey updated their cursive writing requirements when their Democrat governor, Phil Murphy, signed a cursive mandate into law just before leaving office in January. Those new standards will go into effect for students in the fall with the start of a new school year. As Governor Murphy said, we owe it to our students to give them a well-rounded education that ensures that they have the tools to fully understand our rich history and become competent leaders. It is nice to see Democrats on board with something that I strongly support too. Speaking of things and people that I strongly support, as the United States and Israel continue their joint military campaign against Iran, Israelis set up a memorial in a square in Tel Aviv to honor all fallen American service members. Their display turned a usually busy public space into a quiet square of reflection where Israelis gather to pay their respects to the American soldiers who lost their lives during this conflict, one that is known in Washington as Operation Epic Fury and one that is referred to in Israel as Operation Roaring Lion. The Israeli memorial features photos of 6 fallen U.S. soldiers with flowers placed nearby as visitors pause in silence to express their respect and to honor what can never be replaced or repaid. The soldiers that have been honored in the Israeli display were members of the United States Army Reserve who were working in logistics when a drone struck their command center in Kuwait during heavy incoming fire. A sign at the memorial honoring them reads, "For the American heroes, your courage and dedication will not be forgotten." This message was placed alongside another one from Psalms 34:14, which reads, "Seek peace and pursue it." The heroes that were honored in the Israeli memorial are Major Jeffrey R. O'Brien, Captain Cody Cork, Chief Warrant Officer 3 Robert Marzin, Sergeant First Class Nicole Amour, Sergeant First Class Noah Tietjens, and Sergeant Declan Cody. Army Sergeant Benjamin N. Pennington, who was also killed in an Iranian drone attack, was not included in the display because his name had not yet been publicly announced when the memorial was created. His remains were returned home to the United States in a dignified transfer at Dover Air Force Base on Monday. As of Tuesday, about 140 U.S. service members have been wounded over 10 days of sustained attacks, though most injuries have thankfully been minor, and 108 of those troops have already returned to duty, according to the Chief Pentagon spokesman, Sean Parnell. 8 service members are listed as being severely injured, and they are receiving the highest level of medical care, but nevertheless, they have more than earned our prayers on their behalf as well. As for Israel, their heartfelt demonstrations of respect are a long-standing position. Israel has frequently erected memorials that were dedicated to American victims and service members long before this. One of the most prominent examples of that is the 9/11 Living Memorial Plaza in Jerusalem, which was built by the Jewish National Fund, located in the hills outside of this ancient city. Their monument to our fallen is shaped like a rising American flag, and it is the only memorial outside of the United States anywhere in the world that lists all 2,977 victims of the September 11th attacks by name. There, Israel hosts annual commemorations that are attended by both Israelis and Americans alike. I can recognize friend from enemy. Israel, friend. Khamenei, enemy. Speaking of recognizing who has me in mind when they act, and who flips me the bird and even attacks me and my interests through their actions, as the 2026 midterms approach, Democrats are fighting to reclaim the majority in at least one or even both chambers of Congress. But according to a recent poll, the Democrat Party is ranking below almost every key figure and organization that you can think of, with the single exception of the brutal terrorist regime that is currently in control of Iran. An NBC News poll that they published on March 8th asked a number of standard questions regarding the economy, the military action in Iran, and the overall performance of President Trump so far. But it also ranked a number of key figures and organizations based on their net favorability. NBC's poll surveyed 1,000 registered voters, just over half of whom were female. The group was evenly divided along political lines, with 42% saying that they leaned Republican, 42% saying that they leaned Democrat, and the rest identifying as either independents or other. Here is what the results were. The Democrat Party, with a net favorability rating of minus 22, ranked near the bottom of the list. In fact, only one alternative ranked below them, although significantly so, and that was the Iranian regime, who had a much lower net favorability of minus 53. On the other end of the extreme, Pope Leo XIV ranked the highest overall with a net favorability rating of 34. In between those two polls, President Trump and the Republican Party were near the middle of the list at minus 12 and minus 14 respectively. And as far as any 2028 presidential contenders, Republicans fared far better than Democrats did in that area. Two of the most likely Democrat primary candidates, the former Vice President Kamala Harris, ranked at minus 17, and the failed governor of California, Gavin Newsom, ranked at minus 18, both decidedly lower than the current Vice President, J.D. Vance, at minus 11. And the best choice that the Republican Party could make, the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, at minus 7. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who is rumored to be considering either a presidential bid or a move to unseat the Senate Minority Leader, Chuck Schumer, was the only Democrat to even break into the top half of the list, tying with Vice President Vance at minus 11. As for the other questions in the survey, just under half of those polled, 44%, said that they approved of President Trump's performance so far, and 54% disapproved. On border security specifically, he fared much better. The numbers flipped, with just over half, 53%, approving of his actions, and a little less than half, 44%, disapproving. On foreign policy, 43% approved and 54% disapproved, numbers that are basically the same as this time last year, right after he took office, when 45% approved and 53% disapproved. On the war in Iran, more than one-third, 41%, approved of the president's actions, and just over half, 54%, disapproved. Those numbers are likely to shift with any results, for better or for worse, as they always do. But NBC's poll was not the only one to indicate warning signs for the Democrat Party. A number of polls in recent months have spelled trouble for Democrats, with one from the Wall Street Journal last July showing that Democrats had sunk to their lowest approval rating in decades, with well over half of Americans, 63%, almost two-thirds, holding a negative view of the party. But let's look outside of our own country and see what the rest of the world was up to this week. On Wednesday, a brilliant piece of video footage emerged from Australia capturing the frantic and humiliated retreat of the thugs working for the Iranian regime after they realized that they had lost their grip on the national women's soccer team. That video quickly went viral, serving as a visceral exclamation point on the high-stakes international defection of 5 members of the squad who vanished into the safety of asylum in Australia, leaving their would-be captors retreating in a panic. This satisfying footage showed members of the Iranian security apparatus who were tasked with ensuring that no players escaped the regime's reach were now running frantically down a flight of stairs. The composure of these oppressive bullies had been completely shattered. the men appeared desperate and downright disoriented upon discovering that 5 of the women had successfully slipped away. Somebody's in trouble. This epic scene was narrated by a local Australian whose scathing commentary provided a perfectly quintessentially Western backdrop to the regime's brutal failure. As the agents of oppression bolted, the Australian narrator mocked their sudden loss of power and humiliating impotence, shouting, "It's Australia now! You're in Australia! You're in Australia! You better run! Yeah, we're gonna get you now! You better run! Yeah, you got no rights here! You're in Australia! I know who you are! Get down the stairs, yeah! You gotta run now! What cowards are you guys running? Yeah, cowards! The news is going to love this! Get the F out of our country, IRGC!" Bravo, dude. Couldn't have said it better myself. More of this, Australia. More of this. While some players felt compelled to return to Iran due to threats against their families, the video of their minders in full flight highlights a rare public defeat for the IRGC. Their often pointless oppression of women purely for oppression's sake has never known any bounds. In 2019, Sahar Kodeari, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that name, a devoted fan of the Estelal team, a woman who became known as the Blue Girl, disguised herself as a man in order to enter the stadium where all women are banned. After being caught, she was facing a prison sentence for going to a sporting game. And so she set herself on fire in protest and tragically died. Her death sparked international outrage, forcing FIFA to pressure Iran into allowing women to enter stadiums for certain matches, although the ban is often still enforced, or at least restricted through other means, such as selective ticketing. For a regime that relies heavily on this legacy of fear and stadium bans to keep women suppressed, the sight of their enforcers running terrified down a staircase in a free nation that said no offered a powerful visual for the despotic regime's waning grip on power. Back home, we need to start addressing the harmful people who have a grip on the everyday people that are actually contributing to our society. A man that stands accused of shoving 2 men, one of whom was an 83-year-old Airforce veteran, onto subway tracks in New York City last Sunday, turned out to be an illegal foreign national who has been deported on no less than 4 separate occasions. Dude, I do not know how we can make it any clearer to you that you are not wanted or welcome here. Unless we were to institute the death penalty for your next break-in. And I am about 1 more story away from being okay with that for repeat deportees who come back. Bayron Posada Hernandez first entered our country on January 2nd of 2008. He was subsequently deported 4 different times. The most recent deportation being in 2020, according to the Department of Homeland Security. Then he snuck into the country illegally for a 5th time without getting caught. This Honduran national, someone who is not our problem, has a lengthy rap sheet covering 15 prior charges. Not arrests. The number of times that he was actually charged with crimes, including assault, domestic violence, obstruction of police, possession of a weapon, drug possession, and aggravated assault. In a statement on Thursday, the Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Department of Homeland Security, Lauren Biss, said, Byron Posada Hernandez is a serial criminal and a 4-time deported illegal alien from Honduras who should never have been able to walk our streets and harm innocent Americans. We are praying for the victims and their families. DHS is calling upon New York sanctuary politicians to commit to this ICE detainer and not release this heinous criminal back into New York communities. And speaking of those innocent victims of the elitist politicians' luxury policies, Posada Hernandez allegedly shoved our elderly American veteran, who has since been identified as Richard Williams, and also a 30-year-old man, onto the tracks in an entirely unprovoked attack last Sunday morning, according to the New York Post. The illegal national of another country, their problem, then fled the scene before bystanders saved the two men from getting hit by the next subway train. Disturbing cell phone footage of the attack was obtained by the New York Post, and it showed Posada Hernandez calmly walking away after randomly trying to kill two people for no reason whatsoever, one of which was an elderly person. According to DHS, ICE lodged a detainer on March 10th, requesting that local authorities hand, specifically, Posada Hernandez over to the feds, so that they will not be required to hunt him down in the community. But we will if you don't hand him over. Let's be clear about that. Still, local authorities are not expected to comply due to sanctuary laws, so you know who to blame when ICE comes knocking, New Yorkers, and when others get swept up in the dragnet, all of which could have been avoided simply by turning over the violent criminals. That's all you have to do. According to DHS, more than 7,110 illegal foreign nationals were in local law enforcement custody for crimes all across the state of New York just in February. And these are just the ones that ICE put detainers on. Between them, these illegal foreign inmates are responsible for 148 homicides, 717 assaults, 134 burglaries, 106 robberies, 235 dangerous drug offenses, 152 weapons offenses, and 260 predatory sexual offenses. Posada Hernandez joined them on Tuesday. He was arrested at a homeless shelter in Brooklyn, where he was being allowed to take a spot from an American on the streets. He is now charged with attempted murder, attempted assault, and reckless endangerment. His victim, Mr. Williams, is still clinging to life at a local hospital, according to the New York Post. A fine thank you to someone who served this country to allow this to happen to him. On Tuesday, one of his daughters told the Post that, quote, "My father, Richard, is on a respirator in the ICU in the hospital. That's all we are going to say." Proud of yourself, Mandami? Yes, I am going to hold people responsible for the results of their policies. Outcomes are connected to policies, a subtlety of reality that seems to elude you and a few others. So allow me to draw your attention to that fact every time that it is necessary. And speaking of people who deal with their own glaring inadequacies by hating Jews for being competent, all Jewish organizations in the Detroit area were advised to lock down when reports broke that there was an active shooter at a synagogue in West Bloomfield, Michigan. In a statement, the Jewish Federation of Detroit advised our American neighbors, quote, "We are aware of a security incident at Temple Israel. We are advising all Jewish organizations to go into lockdown protocol. Nobody in or out of your building. More information to follow." Here is what happened. Apparently, a bigot slammed his car into the peaceful temple, after which the driver exchanged gunfire with synagogue security before being killed. The fact that synagogues have to have security is a stain on this nation. And frequent incidents like this are the reason why they have standing security. Though these incidents rarely make the news because of the media's own political biases. But they happen all the time to my Jewish friends and neighbors. So I suggest that we change the incentive structure for these vile bigots by crushing them with the harshest of penalties that are allowed by law for anyone involved, preferably public executions to deter any other would-be KKK jihadis. And yes, I am being dead serious about that. I am for doing something that will actually stop it, because this ain't working. In this case, the suspect also reportedly attempted to set off an explosive device. So I am happy to report that he is dead, a fact that was confirmed by law enforcement to the Daily Wire. Good riddance. Oakland County Sheriff Michael Bouchard told people to shelter in place for at least a mile around the temple while law enforcement secured the scene. He added that nobody at the moment has been confirmed to be hurt except the shooter, but they were reviewing video footage to see if any accomplices were involved who might be on foot and a continuing danger to the community. Sheriff Bouchard also said that parents were looking to reunite with their kids at the local Jewish center, saying it's going to be secured by law enforcement, so no fear there. If you have nothing to do with the situation, don't go there. This is what Jewish parents have to go through because we allow it by not making some freaking extreme examples. This is the kind of danger that children in Jewish schools face all the time across this country, the United States of America, the land of the free. This is why every Jewish school, synagogue, and rec center has to have trained security. A lot of times trained by the FBI and other top law enforcement. This is what they face, and we let them face it. I would remind you that the Jews helped slaves escape in the Underground Railroad. The Jews fought for other people's civil rights when no one else would. And we, in turn, abandon them to be targeted by this crap. Shame is not a strong enough word for it. Get out there and change it for them like they did for you. The sheriff also added that there would be extra security put in place at Jewish facilities in the area, saying all Jewish facilities in the area are going to have a lot of extra presence around it until we figure this out. The FBI Director, Kash Patel, confirmed that the FBI was also on the scene. But while some take responsibility for cleaning up other people's messes, others refuse to take responsibility for even cleaning up their own. And the contrast is being noted. Despite having had 2 years to do it, the Democrat governor of California, Gavin Newsom, has yet to so much as contact the family of 7-year-old Delilah Coleman, who suffered injuries that forever changed the course of her life at the hands of an illegal foreign truck driver who received his commercial license from Newsom State. And that is all according to the young girl's father, Marcus Coleman, who spoke about the ongoing state of affairs with the Daily Wire. This illegal foreign national of India, Partap Singh, allegedly caused the multi-car pileup while driving an 18-wheeler in June of 2024, thereby inflicting significant injuries to little Delilah. The young girl, who was only 5 years old at the time, suffered a traumatic brain injury in the crash. She currently still cannot eat anything orally and is still learning to walk again 2 years later. She also has the mentality of an 18 to 24-month-old now, as a direct result of her injuries, according to her father, Marcus. he repeatedly stated that compassionate Newsom has not once contacted the family, even though he is responsible for the policies that made all of this happen. Mr. Coleman said that he's lost hope that that will ever change, saying that he is not holding his breath anymore, especially after making his own attempts to contact Newsom's office himself, and still not being allowed to speak to his own governor, even under these circumstances. Mr. Coleman, a legitimate truck driver, one who knows our traffic laws and can read our road signs, told the Daily Wire regarding Newsom, "How do you not see Delilah? How do you allow politics to blind you from a 5-year-old girl at the time whose life is forever changed? And your only answer is, it's the federal government." A fair question. But Newsom's office takes responsibility for absolutely nothing, even going so far as to deny this father's claim that he contacted them, telling the Daily Wire on February 25th that they had no record of outreach from the Coleman family, adding, "We would welcome the opportunity to connect them to available state resources." So, with Mr. Coleman's blessing, the Daily Wire gave his number to Newsom's office, which confirmed that they had received it, and said that it was much appreciated. Mr. Coleman says that he still has not heard from them. Newsom's spokesperson, Diana Cross-Paleo, nearly said at the time, "What happened to Delilah is heartbreaking. And we commend the family for turning their grief into advocacy." You heartless little... Sweetie, not everything is about political performances, you immature little theater kid. This is the life of their baby girl, and you think that they traded up because now they have a reason to engage in advocacy? By contrast to that viewpoint, and the behavior of actively ignoring the victims that your policies create, President Trump honored little Delilah and her father Marcus by making them guests at his State of the Union speech last month, highlighting the costs of the crashes that are routinely being caused by the surge in illegal foreign truckers who often cannot read or speak English, which is dangerous in a truck driver, especially of an 18-wheeler. During the address, Trump said, "We will take care of this problem. We're going to take care of this problem. We are not playing games. Delilah Coleman was only 5 years old in June of 2024 when an 18-wheel tractor-trailer plowed into her stopped car, traveling at 60 miles an hour or more. The driver was an illegal alien let in by Joe Biden and given a commercial driver's license by open borders, politicians, and California. Doctors said Delilah would never be able to walk or talk, have a good life. She wouldn't even be able to eat again. But against all odds, she is now in the 1st grade, learning to walk, and she is here this evening with her dad, Marcus, a fantastic man. Delilah, please, you are a great inspiration. Please stand up." The Trump administration is currently withholding roughly $160 million in federal funds from Newsom's state for failing to cancel over 17,000 illegally issued commercial driver's licenses by the agreed-upon deadline of January 5th, 2026. The Republican senator of Indiana, Jim Banks, recently introduced the Delilah Law to ensure that all illegal foreign nationals lose their current commercial driver's licenses and that the issuance of any new licenses has stricter requirements for them because real lives are at stake here. This is not a game or a political statement. And speaking of other harmless-looking practices that actually put innocent lives in the crosshairs in reality, on Thursday, the Office of Foreign Assets Control at the U.S. Treasury Department announced sanctions against 4 international nonprofit organizations that have all been identified as being sham charities that were constructed as fronts in order to bankroll the military wing of Hamas. Be very careful who you give your money to if you do not want to be responsible for the next atrocity in this world that sees babies being decapitated, because you could be funding that. 3 of these sanctioned organizations were based in Turkey: the GDD, Hayat Yolu, and Palestinian White Hands. The 4th scam was the KNRP, which is based in Indonesia. Treasury officials allege that these groups posed as humanitarian entities while siphoning the donations to the Al-Qassam military brigades of Hamas. According to investigators at the Treasury, these organizations leverage global networks in order to generate revenue for terrorist operations. But internal Hamas documents were seized by authorities, and they reportedly show that GDD collaborated with sanctioned entities in order to fund construction projects for Hamas. Similarly, Palestinian White Hands, there's an oxymoron, was found to be interwoven into Hamas's military apparatus. In Indonesia, KNRP is accused of coordinating directly with Hamas in order to distribute materials that were intended exclusively for Hamas fighters. In addition to their support for Hamas, the Treasury also identified Hayat Yolu as an operational and financial hub for the Muslim Brotherhood as well. The Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent stated, Hamas continues to finance its military wing by exploiting sham charities to support terrorist operations. The Treasury Department will not allow Hamas to misuse the charitable sector for its violent aims. This week's sanctions build on a series of recent actions aimed at dismantling Hamas's financial infrastructure. Previous rounds of sanctions occurred on June 10th of 2025 and on January 21st of this year. Officials noted that Hamas frequently preys on the sympathies of international donors and scams them by redirecting funds that donors intend to go to Palestinian civilians and using the funds instead to prolong the regional conflict that gets both Jews and Palestinians killed. That is what you are actually funding. That is what you are prolonging with your money, so that you can feel good about giving to a Palestinian charity. As a result of these sanctions, under Executive Order 13224, all property and interests within the United States that belong to these sham entities are now blocked. It should also be noted that legally, Americans are prohibited from engaging in transactions with designated foreign terror groups, of which Hamas is one. And any foreign financial institutions that facilitate transactions for these groups, now that they're sanctioned, risks losing access to the U.S. financial system. But unfortunately, we were not done with the violence inside of our own borders yet. A gunman who opened fire at Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia on Thursday was identified as being one Mohammed Baylor Jalol, a former National Guard soldier who was previously convicted of actively supporting ISIS. And yet, for some bizarrely unjustifiable reason, despite that conviction, he was roaming our streets. According to NBC4 Washington, Jalot traveled to Africa with his father in 2015, where he met with an ISIS recruiter. That same year, he went to Sierra Leone to stay with the ISIS facilitator, and he even planned to go to Libya to join the terrorist organization, but that never actually happened. At one point, he did venture to Niger to join ISIS there, and he even boarded a truck full of other terrorist recruits, but bailed out after 18 hours, according to NBC4. Then, this now 36-year-old terrorist discussed his plans to carry out a Fort Hood-style attack with a government informant that he naively believed was an ISIS terrorist too. According to the Department of Justice, Jalot also praised the gunman who killed 5 soldiers in Chattanooga, Tennessee in July of 2015 to that informant. He also sent $500 to a man that he believed was an ISIS member, but who was actually an undercover FBI agent. At this point, he was arrested for his crimes. He pled guilty in October of 2015 to attempting to provide material support to the designated terrorist group ISIS. Jalot was sentenced to 11 years behind bars and an additional 5 years of supervised release. But for no valid reason at all, he was let out early in December of 2024, according to the New York Post. And as a result of that unjustifiable decision, an innocent person is dead. Because now he's gone and shot up a university, as though that could not be entirely foreseen with his particular history. This naturalized American citizen from Sierra Leone, a great move that really improved this country, stormed into a classroom on Thursday and asked if it was a Reserve Officers Training Corps course. When someone confirmed that it was, he opened fire on the room, shooting the professor, a retired military officer, several times. That poor man later died at the hospital. But this vile loser a-hole picked the wrong group to jihad. One of the students in the room heroically stabbed Jalot to death in defense of others. And good riddance to jihadi oppressors of other free human beings that don't want to belong to your ideology and have a right not to. You do not actually get to control us. The world will not miss you, and the only virgins waiting for you on the other side is you and Lucifer. Enjoy. The director of the FBI, Kash Patel, confirmed that 3 other victims were wounded in the shooting. The Secretary of the Army, Dan Driscoll, said that the injured victims were all Army personnel. Director Patel praised the heroic response of these students under fire, saying that earlier today an armed individual opened fire at Old Dominion University, leaving 1 person dead and 3 others wounded. The shooter is now deceased thanks to a group of brave students who stepped in and subdued him, actions that undoubtedly saved lives, along with the quick response of law enforcement. The FBI is now investigating the shooting as an act of terrorism. Our Joint Terrorism Task Force is fully engaged, embedded with local authorities, and providing all resources necessary in the investigation. In the meantime, please pray for the victims, their families, and the ODU community. This terrorist shooting occurred only hours before a similar attacker, also taken in by this country, one Ayman Mohammed Khazali, a Lebanese national who became a naturalized U.S. citizen in 2016 under the Obama administration, rammed a vehicle into a synagogue in Michigan and opened fire on the building. So the question is, why were these 2, especially the one that we have just been discussing, why, after his terrorism conviction, was this violent religious crusader not stripped of his naturalized citizenship and sent packing with a kick in the butt back to his own hellhole to be their problem before he killed an American who had served this country? It is one or the other. You do have to choose. Who are you going to prioritize? The terrorist that is trying to kill you, or your fellow American that is trying to protect your back? The answer for me is very easy. And meanwhile, with 3 terrorist attacks by midweek, Democrats still do not want to fund the Department of Homeland Security. I cannot imagine why the polls show that Americans have a negative opinion of your party. It is a mystery, wrapped in an enigma. And for those of you who say that we cannot legally take away citizenship from naturalized citizens, I am not talking about people who are born here, but that we cannot take away citizenship from naturalized citizens, not even for terrorists, I say back to you, so change that. Because otherwise, you are leaving me with only one other choice. No more naturalized citizenship for anyone. Only birthright citizenship. Now, to be clear, I do not want that option. But I also do not want to be stuck with jihadis that the next open border president lets into my country to terrorize me and my neighbors. So either give me another option, or it is going to be that one. I will remind you, laws have been changed before, so change this one. And speaking of things that change, books are not what they used to be. I say this as a book lover. A Tale of Two Cities, this is not. I'm going to share the following article by Amanda Harding with you, which was published by the Daily Wire, so that you'll have the information to do with what you will. But fair warning, this segment is not for kids. However, parents unfortunately have to be aware of this stuff in the world that we live in these days, no matter how nauseating and vomit-inducing it may be. That is your responsibility to your children. Here we go. A novel in the young adult genre, which was a Good Morning America young adult book club selection, apparently includes graphic sex scenes of necrophilia, threesomes, and rape. All of which apparently happen at the same time. Sibylline, written by Melissa de la Cruz, is advertised as, quote, a heart-stopping, dark academia romantasy series in the young adult genre. Typically, these books are aimed at middle school and high school children with characters that are around that same age range. Writer Lauren Erbibe for Evie magazine described some of the graphic content in the novel, which included scenes that seemed to depict the rape of a person believed to be deceased. Erbibe noted that in chapter 40, a character named Atticus dies, which is clearly indicated over the course of the chapter by characters Raven and Dorian. Some lines include, he's not breathing, he's not moving. He's dead, Atticus is dead. Atticus isn't breathing. In chapter 41, told from Atticus's perspective, those two characters attempt to bring Atticus back to life by engaging in sexual acts with him. This narrative includes the lines, I have already warned you, not for children, so at this point it's your responsibility. Someone is undressing me. They are undressing themselves as well. Now, Raven's breast is against my mouth. Dorian presses his erection against my back. Raven's hands are on my shaft, guiding me. And as I plunge into her, Dorian's thrusting into me. And the three of us are making love with each other. End quote. The book has been earning mostly one-star reviews on Amazon, and Goodreads, with many readers, notes that the themes are inappropriate for children, and also mentions that there are no warnings on this book regarding its content. Quote, the book's audience is children, And there are graphic depictions of sexual acts between characters. Yes, the characters are older. No, they are not always consenting, one reviewer notes. The main three characters participate in a threesome that is graphic, and this book is listed as appropriate for 9th through 12th graders, which is completely insane. If we think that it's appropriate to market sex, let alone a threesome, to 12-year-olds, there's a serious problem in this industry, another person said. What a piece of filth. Please stop selling this book targeting preteen adolescents, another reviewer shared. I'm appalled at the gruesome, disgusting material that no child should read. What happens to these characters is beyond horrific and made me want to vomit. Glad I'm able to preview books before giving them to my child. This one ended up in the trash. I hope the author is investigated because I just can't understand the perverted imagination it would take to conjure up some of the scenes in this book. Author De La Cruz is also the author of the Isle of the Lost book series, which was later adapted into the popular Descendants movie on Disney. Disney ABC did not immediately respond to the Daily Wire's request for a comment. But other societies were having their own problems as well. They were serious problems, but they were thankfully not that disturbing and disgusting. A state-run newspaper reported that early Saturday morning, anti-government protesters attacked the Communist Party office in northern Cuba in a rare outburst of public dissent that was reportedly triggered by worsening blackouts. Blackouts that have been exacerbated by an oil blockade from the United States. Apparently, a rally that started late Friday evening, one that began as a peaceful protest against power cuts and food shortages, turned violent in the early hours of Saturday morning, according to Vassar newspaper. The videos on social media show a large fire burning in the streets and people throwing rocks through the windows of a building as voices shouted the word for liberty. Reuters was unable to confirm the authenticity of these videos that showed the unrest in northern Cuba, in a city that is about 250 miles east of the capital city of Havana. Here is the backstory for some context. Ever since capturing Venezuela's president, Nicolas Maduro, in January, a notorious dictator who was also Cuba's most significant foreign benefactor, the United States has been tightening the screws on Cuba. President Trump cut off Venezuelan oil shipments to Cuba and threatened to slap tariffs on any country that sells them oil, adding the final few ounces of pressure to a collapsing economy that was already routinely struggling with basic shortages of food, fuel, electricity, and medicine. Routinely. In recent weeks, Trump has made a series of statements saying that Cuba was clearly on the verge of collapse and claiming that they were eager to make a deal with the United States. On Friday, Cuba's government likewise said that it had begun talks with Washington to attempt to defuse the mounting crisis inside of their borders. Now, they are also dealing with these protests, and while protests would be next to meaningless, even routine in America, not everywhere in the world is America, and it must be understood that public protests of any kind, much less violent ones, are exceedingly rare in Cuba. Cuba's 2019 Constitution did finally grant its citizens the right to demonstrate, a right that they did not have prior to 2019. But the law that would actually define that right clearly is still stalled in their legislature, leaving those who take to the streets right now in a very risky legal limbo. Over the past week, several small groups of residents across Havana protested against the extended blackouts, banging pots in the streets of their capital. On Monday, students staged a sit-in on the steps of the University of Havana after their government suspended in-person classes, blaming the U.S. oil blockade for this decision. Fuel shortages have vastly reduced public transportation, making it difficult, if not impossible, for teachers and students to get together for classes. According to the Invasor newspaper, after an exchange with local authorities, as the weekend got started, what initially began peacefully turned into an attack against the headquarters of the Municipal Party Committee. A fire was started in the streets with furniture from the reception area, and several other state-run establishments in the area were also targeted, including a state-run pharmacy and a government market. In one unverified video on social media, a gunshot was heard, and the camera panned to a person that was now lying on the ground. The state media outlet dismissed the reports online that this person had been shot by state police, saying, "Media manipulation seeks to sow fear and confusion among our people. Let's not fall for provocations." The Cuban city that is currently experiencing all of the trouble and unrest was also the site of significant protests during the anti-government riots on July 11th of 2021, which were the largest riots since the Del Castro's revolution in 1959. So far, police have arrested 5 people in this week's unhappy unrest. But police were dealing with our own incidents here too. According to multiple law enforcement sources, a man who was shot and killed by Dallas police during a SWAT standoff this week had worked as a security guard for Representative Jasmine Crockett. Odd. She usually has such intelligent judgment. According to the chief of police in Dallas, late on Wednesday night, local police tracked this suspect, who went by several different aliases and was currently going by the name Mike King, to a parking garage at Children's Medical Center. Officers located the man who had barricaded himself inside of a vehicle in the garage of the Children's Hospital. And after deploying tear gas to force him out, police say that the suspect did emerge, only to point a gun at the SWAT officers. In self-defense, those SWAT officers opened fire, killing the suspect at the scene. Since then, multiple law enforcement sources have confirmed to CBS News that the suspect had been operating under several different aliases but was known publicly as Mike King. He allegedly ran a company called Off-Duty Police Services, which connected police officers in North Texas with off-duty security jobs. But the details of those reports have not been fully confirmed yet. Sources added that this shady man, who was hiding behind several layers of false identities, was wanted for allegedly impersonating a law enforcement officer. Images that were obtained by reporters also clearly show the man known as King standing close to Jasmine Crockett at public events on the campaign trail during her recent run for the United States Senate. Law enforcement sources explained that King had actually been given a position of authority where he oversaw entire teams of security officers that were working at several downtown Dallas events, and that he frequently drove a replica of an undercover police vehicle as part of his charade to create the illusion of legitimacy. Authorities added that this vehicle allegedly used stolen license plates that had been taken from cars outside of a military recruiting office. On top of that, receipts at the Federal Election Committee that were reviewed by the Daily Wire show that a Mike King received payments from Jasmine Crockett for his security services recently, just a few months ago in 2025. Crockett's office has declined to comment on the situation. This incident obviously raises entirely legitimate questions about how this shady suspect, who authorities have confirmed had a criminal background and was using multiple aliases, was able to secure a role providing protection for a sitting member of Congress and operate a business that was placing officers in off-duty security work. But this week was all about terrorist oppressors using violence to try to gain control of other people's cultures and the societies that they built. The weekend in Europe saw the start of an investigation into an overnight explosion that struck a Jewish school in Amsterdam, the latest in an ongoing string of violent Islamic attacks that are targeting Jewish communities across the West. This blast struck the exterior wall of a Jewish school in the modern Jewish quarter of the Dutch capital, an area that is home to synagogues, kosher restaurants, and religious schools for Jewish children. Authorities reported that the explosion caused minor structural damage, charring parts of the outer wall and damaging a rain pipe, but thankfully no injuries were reported. Amsterdam's mayor condemned the incident as a deliberate act of intimidation against the Jewish population in that European city, calling it a cowardly act of aggression towards the Jewish community, and adding that additional security will be deployed around Jewish institutions throughout Amsterdam. Dutch police say that investigators have obtained images of the suspect that they believe detonated the dangerous explosive device, although no arrests have been announced so far. This incident is only the latest in a massive surge in anti-Semitic attacks across Europe. Earlier this week, an explosive device lit a synagogue entrance on fire in Rotterdam, the second largest city in the Netherlands. Police later arrested 4 teenage suspects nearby after officials spotted a vehicle driving erratically near another synagogue. Terrorists and bigots alike both like to recruit young people to do their dirty work, given that the part of their impulsive brain that is responsible for correctly judging long-term consequences is still squishy. You have probably noticed that it is rarely the old men who go suicide bombing. They send their sons and their nephews to do it for them, like the impotent cowards that they are. In Belgium, another synagogue was victimized by an explosion earlier in the week in an attack that even local officials admitted was purely anti-Semitic. The Dutch Prime Minister, Rob Jetten, promised that the Amsterdam bombing would prompt renewed security consultations with local Jewish leaders, posting, "There must be no place for anti-Semitism in the Netherlands. I understand the anger and fear and will quickly engage in talks with the Jewish community. They must always feel safe in our country." Respectfully, sir, the time for talk is over, Mr. Prime Minister. Talk is not going to make anyone safe. Doing something to rid your society of the people that are perpetrating all of the violence will. However, the trend of anti-Semitic and Islamist violence in general was not contained to just Europe. Europe is not the only one failing their Jewish communities in favor of tolerating jihadis inside of their own border. The United States is also grappling with a series of serious threats and a string of attacks linked to extremist ideologies that target Jews and Jewish institutions. In Michigan, a Hezbollah-linked gunman rammed a vehicle into Temple, Israel, the largest Jewish Reform congregation in the entire United States, before opening fire on innocent human beings inside. That bigoted terrorist attacker was killed in a shootout with armed security, according to the FBI, who described the incident as a targeted attack of violence against the Jewish community. Authorities confirmed that the synagogue's security team engaged the attacker after he drove a vehicle through the building's entrance, igniting a fire and filling the synagogue with smoke. Thankfully, no members of the congregation were killed, only the vile attacker that the world is a better place without and better off without. Although one security guard was injured from being struck by the attacker's vehicle. That attack in Michigan came only hours after a separate act of terrorism at Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia, where a gunman who has been identified as Mohammed Baylor Jalal, a convicted supporter of ISIS, opened fire at Army personnel inside an academic building. He was also thankfully killed at the scene. The week before this terror-filled one, there was an attempted bombing in New York City in which 2 ISIS-inspired suspects hurled improvised explosive devices at a protest. Authorities reported that the devices contained TATP, an explosive compound that is frequently used in terrorist attacks. In light of the clear wave in radical Islamist violence, security officials have warned civilians that Jewish institutions remain a frequent target for extremists. For Jewish communities in Amsterdam and beyond, the latest explosion merely underscores the fact that synagogues, Jewish schools full of children, and community centers remain symbolic targets for violent actors. Violent actors that the world is long overdue in ridding themselves of. They freely choose violence, and we do get to choose what happens next. So the question is, are we going to stand by and allow this anymore? I don't know about you, but I am done. The violent synagogue attack in Michigan took on an even darker dimension after new intelligence revealed a chilling terrorist connection there. The attacker's brother was a commander for Hezbollah and one that was responsible for rocket attacks on Israeli civilians. So, why was he in our country at all? Not to point out the obvious, but brothers of genocidal terrorists are not welcome immigrants. And this is why. According to the official social media account for the Israel Defense Force, the Hezbollah commander, Ibrahim Muhammad Ghazali, oversaw weapons operations inside the branch of the terror group that was responsible for launching hundreds of rockets at Israeli civilian areas during the recent war. His brother, Ayman Muhammad Ghazali, was the one who carried out the terror attack in Michigan on Thursday, where armed synagogue security guards shot him after he opened fire on an innocent congregation. His body was later found burned inside of the vehicle that he had ran through the building. Thankfully, Israeli forces also eliminated his brother, Ibrahim Ghazali, in an Israeli Air Force strike on a Hezbollah military structure just days before the synagogue attack was perpetrated inside the United States. The newly revealed family connection is now prompting investigators to take an even closer look into whether the Michigan attacker had deeper ties himself to the Iran-backed terror group. Hezbollah is designated by the United States as a foreign terrorist organization, and these violent Hezbollah thugs have spent decades building global networks, which we allowed them to do while we sat on our thumbs, and while they carried out attacks against Western targets, including, but not limited to, Israelis. Again, I say it. I'm done. I am for anything within the bounds of the law that makes this stop. That is it for me this week. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, I would ask you to please help me build this podcast into a success by clicking the like and follow buttons, because that is what does the trick in making these things successful, and it doesn't cost anything to do. And I hope that you come back again next week. Until then, have a good week, my friends.